So, in closing, from the peculiar events from my terrible childhood, starting with, I guess ultimately, the circumstances surrounding my first kind of rebellious friend group, to, the attempted forms of, and how, these American psyches think they can just get away with and produce whatever variable necessitative agenda they believe in their favor. But if at any given point they can prove why everything they liberate doesn't apply to them, similar to how a wealthy man doesn't apply, or applies how good Christian morals aren't important to his membership at the church because of how much he donates to it, or how the law doesn't apply to him, from celebrities to wealth to tax code to everything. And he just keeps getting away with it because he's super wealthy. From R. Kelly to Donald Trump, these people have produced gangsterous enslavement acts and assumed they were going to get away with it. But, then you got Brad Pitt, part of a torture team, which is ultimately insisting upon natures of defamatory blackmail and bribery and sexual temptations, unto which, this is Hollywood, I'm not sexually tempted by Brad, just so, I don't know, we've got a lot of retarded men in our society. If they can not understand what you're talking about and link sexual temptations, Brad Pitt, one sentence, are you gay, boy? But, the highest, Brad's kind of like the highest temptation figure for the females. Our highest temptation figures, like Angelina and Megan Fox, and, these people are all ingrained in a sort of variable into which, especially the women, because they're less intelligent, less rational about righteousness. They're very intelligent, emotionally intelligent. It's just that because of their emotional state, sometimes their inflammation of going against what's right to do something far righter, which is the simplest way I can explain to a simple mind what righteousness is. It's like a higher form of patriotism, if you will. There's a disconnect between their rationale and how they apply that into which is unthinkable. Now, again, since Roosevelt, his cousin, has committed all those coups in the Middle East, it's been a revolving door of circumstances because of how prevalently wealthy and hard major a player they were to us in a seemingly morally unconscionable place into what we understood. Same thing with the Orient. What America's most significant pathology, in my opinion, is not being able to see through another's eyes, get into their shoes. Which, that is where I come eye to eye with Hollywood. These fictional films, or recapturings and depictions of human society through incomprehensible variables, to just sitting around reading books and reasoning it out, is brilliant. All these things still have lots of good stuff I'm not explaining, and I get that. But the pathology of how they're leveraging the dark side of their symbiological, theological manipulation of good reason, warping of righteousness, is a continuous variable, and I've seen the highest degree of it. I have PTSD from it because I know at any given corner they're essentially committing psychological things against me. Similar to how, when I was faking a joke to implore my friends to get, I want you to think back to what we were doing in the documentary about openness and honesty, and do that from a recap as to where you are now. As a terminology towards, I'm going to blackmail you. Everyone knew I couldn't well, Paul might have been able to. He talked about a few nasty things, but it was in the past and it's gone, and he's not into it, so it's not like he'd ever get in trouble. But, anyways, it was all just good, honest films, so if they were rational, they should have known I couldn't blackmail them. But, and how irrational that was, but, ultimately, you have to think about here, now, and why then. What was the example I was just thinking when people pathologically took me seriously and did, psychological experiments. At one point, I was trying to administer the notion this was all psychological. Well, it's not. All you had to do is if, I was offending you or freaking you out, all you had to do was, ignore me as a friend. I didn't care because Facebook was like a black book or an address book, which I never actually used. It was a backup. At a time, we didn't have clouds, and, everyone was, at that time in history, scared shitless of losing their cell phone because it meant a disconnection to literally everyone you knew. Numbers gone. The cloud was just coming out at that time. And that's partly why I really didn't care about Facebook anymore, partially as well. But Facebook allowed you to stay connected to people whose numbers you didn't even have. They were just very indirect, slight connections, who you wouldn't feel comfortable just calling people on the phone. It's not like you're that close to them, but it's like, well, I can, put out my feelers and, I met you that one time for a couple weeks and we did a couple cool things, or, hey, we had a romantic night together, even though it was just quick and brief and we're too far away in different places to get back into things seriously by actually giving each other a phone call closeness, sort of thing for me. And then also, anyways, what I've discovered in this period of time, though, is how many pathological things had been done by my friends behind my back before even retouching on these events. How America is continuously committing variables into which are sinister and sick because of the growth of dark space, aka assets and liabilities, innocent people who are victims, into which become further victims and being leveraged. Leveraging systems which are untouchable and prosecutable, I don't know, just difficult. And growing powers and technologies and artistry and methods and circumstance and communication systems which are outside the benevolent systems into which our overall moral construct, law base, is oversighted through. I was on Google explaining the epic, most insane things of clear indications of life-threatening circumstances. They did nothing. They were just like, well, he's getting angry. He's starting to use racial slander. He's starting to generalize people. He's starting to talk hate talk. And it's just like, yeah, I get where and how you're vindicating a system, but the overall test was about, would you do something if I created a reality in my innocent life to do something about it? And no, the Google people would not, unfortunately. If they were capturing social media sites of all those terrible things you hear about and go to war for, they would isolate us from it. So ultimately, that's not the UN. The UN needs to have these these nuances of methodologies which the Americans are exploiting, and a revariabilization as to a global human rights and fair trade government democracy has to be not put under the thumb of a bunch of hypocrites, which I call, unfortunately now, the United States of America.